The notification sound pierced through my morning coffee ritual like a knife. 30 photos. All of them showing my husband of 27 years in compromising positions with a woman young enough to be our daughter. She'd sent them to my phone with a single message. "He's mine now, old lady. Time to step aside." What she didn't know was that I owned a digital marketing agency, had connections in every corner of the internet, and absolutely nothing left to lose. My name is Margaret, and I'm 62 years old. For the past 3 decades, I've built a life around being the perfect wife, the devoted mother, the woman who always put everyone else's needs before her own. I raised 2 children while my husband David climbed the corporate ladder. I hosted dinner parties for his colleagues, attended every company function with a smile plastered on my face, and never once complained when he missed anniversaries, birthdays, or school plays because work always came first. The morning those photos arrived, I was sitting in the kitchen of our suburban home in Westchester, the same kitchen I'd redesigned twice to accommodate David's changing tastes. The granite countertops gleamed under the early sunlight streaming through windows I'd personally selected and had installed during our last renovation. Everything in this house bore my fingerprints, my careful attention to detail, my dedication to creating a beautiful home for our family. I should have been devastated. Any normal wife would have collapsed into tears, would have thrown the phone across the room, would have called her sister or best friend to sob about the betrayal. Instead, I found myself studying each photograph with the analytical mind that had made me successful in my career. The lighting was poor. The angles were unflattering. And most importantly, the metadata embedded in each image told me exactly when and where they were taken. The woman's name was Brittany Chan, and she worked as David's assistant at the investment firm where he was a senior partner. I'd met her at the last Christmas party, a 28-year-old with ambitious eyes and a dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. She'd been respectful then, almost deferential, calling me Mrs. Patterson and complimenting my jewelry. Now she was trying to destroy my marriage with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for her actions. What Brittany didn't understand was that I hadn't spent the last 15 years building my digital marketing agency, just to fold at the first sign of personal crisis. My company, Silverline Strategic, specialized in online reputation management, social media campaigns, and what we euphemistically called competitive intelligence. I knew how to make things go viral, how to control narratives, and most importantly, how to make sure certain information reached exactly the right people at exactly the right time. The photos had been taken in David's downtown office, the same office where I'd attended countless company events over the years. I recognized the view from his corner window, the distinctive marble pattern of his desk, even the painting on the wall that I'd helped him select when he'd been promoted to partner. They'd been reckless, sloppy, and now their carelessness was going to cost them everything. I set my coffee cup down carefully and opened my laptop. My first call was to my business partner, Sarah, a woman who'd stood by me through every challenge we'd faced building our company from nothing into a multi-million-dollar operation. "Margaret? You're calling early. Everything okay?" "Sarah, I need you to clear my calendar for the rest of the week. Something's come up, and I need to handle a personal matter with the full weight of our professional expertise." There was a pause. Sarah had known me for 15 years. She could read the controlled fury in my voice, the careful modulation that meant I was operating in crisis mode. "What do you need?" "I need a complete digital forensics workup on someone. I need social media monitoring across all platforms. And I need you to prepare our crisis management protocols, but in reverse. We're not protecting a reputation today. We're systematically destroying 1 inch." I explained the situation in clinical terms, the same way I'd brief a client about a competitive threat. Sarah listened without interruption, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Margaret, are you sure about this? Once we start down this path." She sent explicit photos to my personal phone with the intention of humiliating me and destroying my marriage. She made this choice, Sarah. I'm simply responding in kind, but with better resources and fewer scruples. Within an hour, Sarah had compiled a comprehensive digital profile of Brittany Chan. Social media accounts across 6 platforms, professional profiles on LinkedIn and industry websites, public records, employment history, even her college transcripts. The girl had been prolific in documenting her life online, posting constantly about her expensive tastes, her ambitious career goals, and her disdain for basic women who don't know how to keep their men happy. That last post had been published just 2 days ago, accompanied by a photo of her wearing what I now recognized as David's Christmas gift to me. A Cartier bracelet I'd never received because he claimed the jewelry store had been sold out. The rage that had been simmering beneath my controlled exterior began to burn hotter. I spent the rest of the morning cataloging every piece of evidence I could find. David's credit card statements, which I had access to as his wife, showed months of expensive dinners, hotel rooms, and gifts that had never made it home to me. His phone records revealed hundreds of calls and text messages to Brittany's number, often late at night when he claimed to be working on important deals. But the most damning evidence came from David's own social media presence. He'd been careless there too, posting photos from business trips that coincidentally matched Brittany's travel timeline. Check-ins at restaurants where they'd obviously dined together. Even a photo of champagne glasses toasting successful negotiations that had been taken at the same time Brittany had posted a nearly identical image to her Instagram story. They thought they were being clever. They thought they were being discreet. They had no idea they were leaving a digital trail that a trained professional could follow like breadcrumbs, leading straight to their destruction. My phone buzzed with another message from Brittany. Did you show him the photos yet? Or are you too pathetic to even confront him? Some wives have dignity. Others just cling to men who don't want them anymore. I screenshot the message and added it to my growing file. Every insult, every attempt at psychological manipulation, every cruel word was building my case and strengthening my resolve. She wanted to play psychological warfare with someone who'd spent decades navigating the cutthroat world of corporate marketing. She was about to learn the difference between amateur cruelty and professional devastation. David came home that evening with flowers and an apology for working late again. He kissed my cheek with the same lips that had been photographed kissing another woman, and asked about my day with the casual indifference of someone who'd grown comfortable taking his wife for granted. How was the office today, honey? Any interesting projects? Actually, yes. I'm working on a fascinating case study about how quickly reputations can be destroyed in the digital age. It's amazing how much damage can be done with just the right information reaching the right people at the right time. He wasn't paying attention, already loosening his tie and reaching for the remote control. That's nice, Margaret. What's for dinner? I ordered Thai food. It should be here soon. What I didn't mention was that I'd spent the afternoon creating a comprehensive social media strategy that would systematically dismantle Brittany Chen's carefully curated online presence. I'd identified her key vulnerabilities, her professional ambitions, her social status anxiety, and her desperate need for online validation. Brittany had built her identity around being young, successful, and desirable. She posted constantly about her designer clothes, her expensive lifestyle, and her career achievements. She was particularly proud of her recent promotion at David's firm, which she'd leveraged into speaking engagements and networking opportunities within the finance industry. She'd made one critical error. She'd used her professional social media accounts to document her affair. LinkedIn posts about working closely with senior partners and learning from experienced leaders now took on a different meaning when cross-referenced with her personal Instagram photos. She'd been bragging about sleeping her way to the top without realizing she was creating evidence of her own unprofessional conduct. That night, while David slept soundly beside me, probably dreaming about his young mistress, I began implementing phase 1 of my campaign. I created anonymous accounts across multiple platforms and began systematically documenting the timeline of their affair. Not with explicit photos or obvious accusations, but with careful juxtapositions of their social media posts, public check-ins, and professional achievements. I started with LinkedIn, the platform where Brittany was most professionally vulnerable. Using an account registered to a fake marketing consultancy, I began commenting on her posts with innocent-seeming questions that highlighted the suspicious timing of her career advancement. Congratulations on your promotion. It must be rewarding to work so closely with the senior partners. How do you balance professional relationships with personal boundaries in such an intimate work environment? The comments were subtle enough to avoid detection by platform moderators, but pointed enough to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of her professional network. Within hours, her colleagues and industry contacts were seeing suggestions that her rapid advancement might not have been entirely merit-based. Phase 2 targeted her personal social media presence. Britney had a substantial Instagram following, built around her lifestyle brand as a successful young professional. She regularly posted about expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, and designer purchases that far exceeded what someone in her position should have been able to afford. I began creating fake accounts of concerned friends who asked pointed questions about her finances. "Britney, that's such a beautiful Hermes bag. I've been saving for one for years. What's your secret for affording such gorgeous pieces on an assistant's salary?" Again, the comments appeared supportive on the surface, but they highlighted the discrepancy between her lifestyle and her official income. The beauty of social media warfare is that once you plant the right seeds of doubt, the audience does most of the work for you. Britney's followers began questioning her authenticity, her honesty, and her methods. The comment sections of her posts filled with speculation about sugar daddies, financial impropriety, and professional misconduct. By the end of the first week, Britney's carefully constructed online persona was beginning to crack. Her engagement rates were dropping as followers questioned her credibility. Professional contacts were distancing themselves from someone who appeared to be involved in questionable ethical situations. And most importantly, screenshots of her suspicious posts were beginning to circulate within her industry. But I wasn't finished. Phase 3 would target the heart of her vulnerability, her professional reputation at David's firm. I'd done my research on the company's policies regarding workplace relationships and professional conduct. Like most major financial institutions, they had strict guidelines about conflicts of interest, ethical behavior, and maintaining professional boundaries. David, as a senior partner, was bound by even stricter codes of conduct, particularly regarding relationships with subordinates. Using my professional network, I began ensuring that the right information reached the right people at the firm. I had contacts in the financial industry, people who owed me favors from successful marketing campaigns and reputation management projects. A word here, a forwarded screenshot there, and soon the whispers were spreading through the corporate ecosystem like wildfire. The turning point came when Britney made a critical mistake. Frustrated by the growing scrutiny of her online presence and the questions about her relationship with David, she decided to double down on her aggression toward me. She sent another batch of photos, these even more explicit than the first, along with a video message. "I see you're not taking the hint, Margaret. David doesn't want you anymore. He's told me all about how boring you are, how you've let yourself go, how he can't stand coming home to you every night. These pictures are just the beginning. If you don't file for divorce and disappear quietly, I'll make sure everyone in your social circle sees exactly what your husband really thinks of you." She'd made a fatal error. By escalating her harassment and making explicit threats, she'd given me legal grounds to pursue her for cyberbullying, stalking, and extortion. But more importantly, she provided me with evidence of her own character that would be devastating when it reached the right audiences. I forwarded her threatening messages to Sarah, who immediately involved our legal team. "Margaret, this is criminal harassment. We can have her arrested." "No," I said, studying the messages with cold calculation. "Arrest is too quick, too clean. She wants to destroy my reputation and my marriage through social humiliation. I'm going to return the favor, but I'm going to do it properly." The next morning I received a call from David's assistant. Not Britney, but the senior administrative coordinator who managed the partners' schedules. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm calling to inform you that there's been a situation at the office. Mr. Patterson and Ms. Chun are both currently under investigation by our Human Resources Department and the company's Ethics Board. I wanted to give you advance notice that there may be some disruption to Mr. Patterson's schedule while this matter is being resolved." I feigned surprise. "Investigation? What kind of investigation?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but it involves allegations of professional misconduct and violations of our workplace relationship policies. The partners are taking the matter very seriously." That afternoon, David came home early, his face pale and his hands shaking as he poured himself a scotch. "Margaret, we need to talk. Something's happened at work and I think someone may have been spreading rumors about me and Britney." I looked up from my laptop where I'd been monitoring the social media firestorm that was rapidly consuming Britney's online presence. Her Instagram account had been flooded with comments questioning her integrity, Her LinkedIn profile was being shared in finance industry groups as an example of unprofessional conduct, and someone had created a viral TikTok compilation of her contradictory posts about work-life balance and professional ethics. Rumors? What kind of rumors, David? He sat down heavily in his leather armchair, the same chair where he'd taken calls with Brittany while I was upstairs reading. They're saying that Brittany and I have been having an inappropriate relationship, that she's been using her position to gain unfair advantages in her career. The partners are conducting a full investigation, and they've suspended both of us pending the outcome. I closed my laptop and gave him my full attention. David, I need to ask you directly. Are these rumors true? The question hung in the air between us. 27 years of marriage, and this was the first time I directly challenged him about his faithfulness. He looked at me with the desperation of a man who realized his carefully constructed lies were crumbling around him. Margaret, there may have been some inappropriate communications between Brittany and me, but it's not what it looks like. She's been pursuing me for months and I may have been unprofessional in how I handled the situation. Unprofessional how? She would send me messages outside of work hours. Personal messages. And I may have responded in ways that could be misinterpreted as encouraging her behavior. I nodded slowly, as if considering his explanation. David, I received some concerning messages this week. Messages from Brittany that suggest your relationship with her has gone far beyond inappropriate communications. His face went white. What kind of messages? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen, watching as he saw his own face staring back at him from the explicit photos Brittany had sent. His expression cycled through shock, horror, and resignation as he realized the scope of what had been exposed. She sent these to me, David. 30 explicit photos and several videos of the two of you together, along with messages telling me that you don't want me anymore, that I should step aside gracefully, and that she's going to destroy our marriage whether I cooperate or not. David's hands were shaking as he set down his scotch glass. Margaret, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you gave her the Cartier bracelet that was supposed to be my Christmas present? Can you explain the hotel receipts, the restaurant charges, the vacation expenses for trips you never took with me? Can you explain why your assistant feels comfortable sending pornographic images to your wife and threatening to destroy our family? The evidence was overwhelming and we both knew it. David slumped forward in his chair, his head in his hands. I don't know how this happened. Started as just, she was young and exciting, and she made me feel important again. But it spiraled out of control. She became possessive, demanding. When I tried to end it, she threatened to tell the partners about our relationship. So you were being blackmailed by your own mistress. She said she had photos, recordings of our conversations. She said she would ruin my career if I didn't leave you and marry her. I felt trapped, Margaret. I felt like I had no choice but to keep seeing her. I studied my husband's face, looking for any trace of the man I'd fallen in love with 30 years ago. What I saw instead was a weak, entitled person who'd allowed his ego and his libido to destroy everything we'd built together. David, did you ever consider that you did have a choice? You could have come to me. You could have gone to the partners yourself and reported her blackmail. You could have acted like a man with integrity instead of a coward who thought he could have everything he wanted without consequences. I know I made terrible decisions. But Margaret, we can get through this. We can go to counseling, work on our marriage. I'll transfer to another firm. We can move somewhere new and start over. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 27 years settling on my shoulders. David, that might have been possible if you'd come to me honestly and asked for forgiveness. But that's not what happened here. Your mistress tried to humiliate me, threatened me, and attempted to destroy our marriage through psychological warfare. And you let her do it. What do you mean? I mean that while you were feeling sorry for yourself and making excuses, I was fighting back. I've spent the last 2 weeks systematically destroying Brittany Chen's reputation, her career prospects, and her social media presence. She wanted to play games with a woman she thought was helpless and naive. Instead, she chose to attack someone who owns a digital marketing agency and has 15 years of experience in online reputation management. David stared at me in shock. You did what? I made her go viral, David, but not in the way she was hoping for. By tomorrow morning, Everyone in the finance industry will know exactly who Brittany Chun is and what kind of person she really is. Her LinkedIn profile has been shared in professional groups as an example of how not to conduct yourself in the workplace. Her Instagram posts about expensive gifts and luxury vacations have been screenshot and circulated with commentary about the suspicious source of her income. Her threatening messages to me have been forwarded to the appropriate authorities and will be used as evidence in harassment charges. I pulled up my laptop and showed him the metrics Sarah had compiled. In the past week, Brittany's online engagement has dropped by 78%. She's lost over half of her Instagram followers. 3 professional networking groups have removed her from their membership. And most importantly, screenshots of her posts have been forwarded to every major firm in the city. She'll never work in finance again. David looked at the data in horror. Margaret, what have you done? I protected myself and our family the same way I would protect any client facing a reputation attack. Brittany wanted to destroy me through social media and psychological manipulation. I simply responded using the same tactics, but with professional-level expertise and resources she couldn't match. But you've ruined her life. No, David. She ruined her own life when she decided to have an affair with a married man, documented extensively on social media, and then try to blackmail both of you while sending threatening messages to his wife. I just made sure there were consequences for her choices. The next morning brought a series of phone calls that confirmed the effectiveness of my campaign. David's firm called to inform him that the investigation had concluded, and both he and Brittany were being terminated for gross misconduct. The evidence of their affair, combined with the documentation of Brittany's harassment of me, had made their decision straightforward. But more satisfying was the call from Brittany herself. Her voice was hysterical, nearly incoherent with rage and desperation. You destroyed me. You ruined everything. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to. Brittany, I interrupted calmly, you're going to do nothing. Because everything I did was legal, ethical, and directly responsive to your own actions. You sent explicit photos to my phone without consent, which is a crime. You threatened and harassed me, which is a crime. You documented your own professional misconduct across multiple social media platforms, which was simply poor judgment on your part. You can't do this to me. I'm young. I have my whole career ahead of me. You had your whole career ahead of you. You chose to throw it away for a married man who was never going to leave his wife. And when that wasn't enough, you chose to attack me directly. Now you're experiencing the consequences of those choices. But I'm losing everything. My job, my reputation, my future. Yes, you are. Just like you intended for me to lose my marriage, my dignity, and my peace of mind. The difference is that I had the resources and the expertise to fight back effectively. There was a long silence on the line. When Brittany spoke again, her voice was small and defeated. What do you want from me? I want you to disappear from our lives completely. Delete our phone numbers, forget our address, and never contact either of us again. Move to another city, find a different career, and spend some time thinking about the kind of person you want to be. Because the person you've been for the past year is someone who destroys families for personal gain, and then tries to play victim when there are consequences. And if I do that, you'll stop the social media campaign. Brittany, there is no campaign to stop. What you're experiencing now is the natural result of your own documented behavior reaching the people who needed to see it. Your reputation is based on your actions, not my manipulation of facts. If you want to rebuild your life, you'll need to start by taking responsibility for the choices that brought you to this point. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a fresh cup of coffee and reflected on the transformation I'd undergone in just 2 weeks. The woman who'd received those first threatening photos had been prepared to accept her husband's betrayal quietly, to perhaps suggest counseling and work toward rebuilding their marriage. But Brittany's escalating attacks had awakened something in me that I hadn't even realized existed. A fierce determination to protect myself and demonstrate that there were consequences for trying to destroy other people's lives. David filed for divorce 3 months later, citing irreconcilable differences. He claimed he needed time to find himself and figure out what he really wanted. What he really wanted, apparently, was to avoid taking responsibility for his choices while preserving as much of his reputation and assets as possible. Unfortunately for David, my expertise in reputation management extended to legal strategy as well. I documented everything. The affair, the harassment, the financial impropriety, and his complete failure to protect his family from his mistress's attacks. When it came time to divide our assets, the evidence spoke clearly about who had violated the terms of our marriage, and who had acted in good faith to preserve our family. I kept the house, 70% of our investment portfolio, and full control of my business. David kept his remaining dignity, which wasn't much, and the knowledge that his actions had cost him everything he'd spent 3 decades building. The most satisfying moment came 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I was having lunch with Sarah at our favorite restaurant downtown, when I noticed a familiar figure working behind the hostess stand. Brittany Chun, former rising star of the finance world, was seating customers at a mid-range chain restaurant and wearing a polyester uniform instead of designer suits. She saw me too, and for a moment our eyes met across the dining room. I saw recognition, embarrassment, and something that might have been regret. I raised my wine glass in a small salute and turned back to my conversation with Sarah. "You know," Sarah said, "I was wrong about whether you should pursue this path. I thought it might consume you, turn you into someone you wouldn't recognize. But look at you now. You're stronger, more confident, and more successful than you've ever been." She was right. The process of fighting back had revealed capabilities I hadn't known I possessed. My business had grown substantially as word spread about my successful handling of a complex reputation crisis. I'd been invited to speak at conferences about digital defense strategies and crisis management. Most importantly, I'd learned that I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself, with or without anyone else's support. That evening, I received an unexpected phone call from my daughter Grace, who was finishing her residency at a hospital in California. "Mom, I heard about you and Dad. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to support you through all of this." "Grace, you were exactly where you needed to be, saving lives and building your career. This was something I needed to handle on my own. But Mom, what Dad did, and what that woman did to you, it's unforgivable." It was unforgivable, but it was also educational. I learned that I'm much stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. I learned that I don't need anyone else's permission to defend myself. And I learned that sometimes the best way to handle bullies is to show them that they've chosen the wrong target. I heard through Dad's family that the woman who was harassing you basically disappeared from social media completely. People are saying her career is completely over. People are saying a lot of things. What I can tell you is that actions have consequences, and people who try to destroy other families shouldn't be surprised when their own lives fall apart as a result. Mom, I'm proud of you. I know this must have been devastating, but you handled it like a warrior. I handled it like a professional, Grace. I used the skills I developed over 15 years in business to protect myself and my family. That's exactly what those skills are for. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back patio, looking out over the garden I'd spent years cultivating. The house was quiet in a way that felt peaceful rather than lonely. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come home, wasn't planning my evening around someone else's schedule, wasn't measuring my worth by how well I served other people's needs. The woman who'd received those first threatening photos would have been devastated by divorce, would have seen it as a failure and a source of shame. But the woman I'd become through this process understood that sometimes the end of one story is simply the beginning of a better one. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Margaret, I just got off the phone with a potential client. Fortune 500 company dealing with a social media crisis. They specifically requested you after hearing about your recent work. Are you interested?" I smiled as I typed back. "Send me the details. I'm always interested in helping people who've been attacked by bullies." 6 months later, I was standing in front of a conference room full of marketing executives, presenting a case study on defensive reputation management. I'd changed the names and details to protect everyone's privacy, but the core lessons were clear. Document everything, never respond emotionally, use professional-level strategies against amateur attacks, and never underestimate the power of consequences to change behavior. The key insight from this case, I told the audience, is that people who attack others through social media and psychological manipulation are usually operating from a position of weakness. They rely on their targets being unprepared, emotional, and isolated. When you respond with professional-level expertise, comprehensive documentation, and strategic thinking, you can not only defend yourself successfully, but ensure that the aggressor faces appropriate consequences for their behavior. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. But isn't this kind of response just escalating the conflict? Shouldn't people try to take the high road and de-escalate? That's an excellent question. There's a difference between escalation and proportional response. The high road is certainly appropriate when dealing with misunderstandings, minor conflicts, or people who are acting in good faith but making mistakes. But when someone is systematically trying to destroy your life, your marriage, or your reputation through deliberate cruelty, the high road can quickly become a path to victimization. I clicked to the next slide, which showed before and after metrics from the case study. The person in this scenario spent months trying to destroy a marriage through psychological warfare. She sent explicit photos without consent, made threats, engaged in harassment, and demonstrated a complete lack of remorse or boundaries. A polite conversation or a request to stop would not have been effective against someone demonstrating this level of malicious intent. Another hand went up. So what's the line between defending yourself and becoming a bully yourself? The line is documentation, proportionality, and truth. Everything I did in this case was based on factual information that the aggressor had made public herself. I didn't create false narratives or fabricate evidence. I simply ensured that her documented behavior reached the people who needed to see it. The consequences she faced were directly related to her own choices and actions. After the presentation, several attendees approached me with questions about their own reputation challenges. Each conversation reinforced what I'd learned through my own experience. There are far more people being victimized by social media attacks and psychological manipulation than there are people equipped to fight back effectively. That realization sparked an idea that would define the next phase of my career. Within a year, I'd launched a specialized division of my agency focused specifically on helping individuals defend themselves against online harassment, social media attacks, and reputation destruction campaigns. We called it the Personal Defense Initiative, and our tagline was simple: when bullies attack, we fight back professionally. Our first major case involved a middle-aged teacher whose ex-husband had enlisted his new girlfriend to systematically destroy his former wife's reputation through fake social media accounts and coordinated harassment campaigns. The attacks had cost the teacher her job, her social relationships, and nearly her home before she found us. Using the same methodologies I developed during my own crisis, we documented the harassment campaign, identified the perpetrators, and ensured that appropriate legal and professional consequences followed. Within 6 months, the ex-husband had been arrested for cyberstalking, his girlfriend had been fired from her job for misusing company resources to create fake accounts, and our client had been reinstated to her teaching position with a public apology from the school district. The case generated significant media attention, and suddenly I was being interviewed by news programs about the rise of social media harassment and the importance of professional-level defense strategies. The shy, accommodating woman who'd spent decades putting everyone else first had become an advocate for people who refused to be victimized by bullies. 2 years after my divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected visitor. David appeared at my door on a Tuesday evening, looking older and more worn than I remembered. He was carrying flowers and wearing the expression of someone who'd spent months rehearsing an apology. "Margaret, I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to tell you how sorry I am for everything that happened. I made terrible choices, and I let you down in every possible way." I invited him in, more out of curiosity than kindness. He sat in the same chair where he'd once confessed his affair, but now he looked smaller, diminished. "I've been in therapy for over a year," he continued. "I've been trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could betray his wife and family for a momentary thrill. And I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I threw away. David, I appreciate you coming here to apologize. I know that took courage. But I'm not the same person I was when you left, and forgiveness isn't something I'm offering right now. I understand. I wanted you to know that I see how strong you've become, how successful you are now. I'm proud of you, even though I know I have no right to be." "You're right. You don't have the right to be proud of me. You weren't there when I was building this strength. You weren't there when I was fighting for my dignity and my future. You were the obstacle I had to overcome, not the partner who supported me. He nodded sadly. I know. I just hoped. I thought maybe we could find some way to be friends eventually. For the kids' sake, if nothing else. David, our children are adults who can maintain relationships with both of us independently. They don't need us to be friends for their sake. What they need is to see that their mother has standards, boundaries, and enough self-respect to not accept betrayal and cruelty as the price of maintaining relationships. After he left, I realized that his visit had been more validation than disruption. The man who'd once been the center of my world now seemed like a minor character in someone else's story. His approval or disapproval, his regret or satisfaction, had no impact on my life or my happiness. That night, I called Grace to tell her about her father's visit. How do you feel about seeing him again, Mom? Honestly, I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction. He's become irrelevant to my life, and that feels like the healthiest possible outcome. Mom, can I tell you something? Watching you handle everything that happened, it changed how I think about relationships, about standing up for myself, about what I'm willing to accept from people. You showed me what it looks like to refuse to be a victim. Grace, that might be the most important thing I've ever accomplished. Not just for you, but for myself. I spent so many years thinking that being a good wife and mother meant accepting whatever treatment people chose to give me. I learned that love and respect have to go both ways, and that defending yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. 5 years have passed since Brittany Chun sent me those first threatening photos. My business has grown into a nationally recognized agency specializing in reputation defense and crisis management. I've written a book about strategic response to social media attacks that became a bestseller in the business category. I've been featured in major magazines as an expert on online harassment and defensive marketing strategies. But the most important change isn't professional. It's personal. I wake up every morning in a home that belongs entirely to me, surrounded by beautiful things I've chosen for my own pleasure, rather than to impress other people. I make decisions based on my own values and priorities, not on what will make other people comfortable or happy. I've learned to say no without justification and yes without guilt. Last month, I received a LinkedIn message from a young marketing professional who'd read my book. Ms. Patterson, I'm currently dealing with a situation similar to what you described in your book. A former colleague is trying to damage my reputation through social media after I reported him for sexual harassment. He's created fake accounts to post negative reviews about my work and is spreading rumors about my personal life to our industry contacts. I feel helpless and don't know how to fight back without looking vindictive. Can you help me? I scheduled a consultation call with her that afternoon. Her name was Jessica, and she was 26 years old, working at a mid-sized advertising agency in Chicago. As she described her situation, I heard echoes of my own story. The feeling of being under attack by someone with fewer scruples and more willingness to use dirty tactics. Jessica, the first thing you need to understand is that you're not helpless. You have more power than you realize, and your former colleague has made several critical mistakes that we can use to your advantage. But everyone says I should just ignore it, that responding will only make things worse. Everyone who says that has never faced a systematic reputation attack by someone with malicious intent. Ignoring bullies doesn't make them stop. It tells them they can escalate without consequences. Over the next 6 weeks, I worked with Jessica to implement a comprehensive defense strategy. We documented every false review, every fake account, every piece of harassment. We traced the digital footprints back to her former colleague and built an irrefutable case against him. Most importantly, we crafted a response that positioned Jessica as a professional who refused to be victimized, rather than as someone seeking revenge. The results were swift and decisive. Her former colleague was fired from his position when the evidence of his harassment campaign reached his employer. The fake accounts were reported and removed from all major platforms, and Jessica's reputation was not only restored but enhanced, as her professional network rallied around someone who'd stood up to a workplace predator. Miss Patterson, she told me during our final call, you didn't just save my career. You taught me that I have the right to defend myself, and that there are ethical, professional ways to fight back against people who try to destroy others. That conversation crystallized something I've been thinking about for months. The skills I developed during my own crisis weren't just useful for reputation management. They were essential life skills that every person needed in an increasingly connected world. Too many people, especially women, were being taught to accept harassment, betrayal, and cruelty as inevitable parts of life, to respond with grace and forgiveness, even when faced with deliberate malice. I began developing a series of workshops called Strategic Self-Defense for the Digital Age. The program taught people how to document harassment, build evidence files, understand their legal rights, and respond proportionally to attacks on their reputation or well-being. Within 6 months, I was traveling across the country, speaking to packed auditoriums of people who were tired of being told to turn the other cheek when bullies slapped them. The workshop that changed everything was held at a community center in Phoenix. The audience was primarily women between the ages of 40 and 70, many of whom had stories similar to mine. During the Q&A session, a woman named Patricia stood up and shared her experience. My daughter-in-law has been systematically poisoning my relationship with my son and grandchildren for 5 years. She spreads lies about me to family members, excludes me from important events, and has convinced my son that I'm a toxic influence on their family. Everyone tells me to be patient, to kill her with kindness, to prove I'm the bigger person. But nothing I do makes any difference, and I'm losing my family. Her story resonated through the room like a bell. I saw nodding heads, tears, and the recognition that comes when people realize they're not alone in their struggles. Patricia, how long have you been following the advice to be patient and kind? 5 years. 5 years of birthday cards that go unacknowledged, Christmas gifts that get returned, and watching my grandchildren grow up through Facebook posts because I'm not welcome at family gatherings. And in those 5 years, has your kindness and patience improved the situation? No. It's gotten worse. She's more bold now, more cruel. Last month she told my son that I was spreading gossip about their marriage, which was completely untrue. He hasn't spoken to me since. Patricia, what you're describing is a pattern of psychological manipulation and family alienation. The person doing this to you isn't responding to kindness because kindness isn't her language. She understands power, control, and consequences. Until there are consequences for her behavior, she has no reason to change it. I spent the next hour helping Patricia develop a strategic plan that involved documentation, boundary setting, and leveraging family dynamics to create accountability. 6 months later, she sent me an update. Her daughter-in-law's manipulation had been exposed when Patricia finally stopped enabling it and started responding strategically. Her relationship with her son was being rebuilt, and her grandchildren were back in her life. These success stories multiplied across the country as more people learned that they had options beyond passive acceptance or emotional retaliation. The workshops evolved into a certification program for therapists, life coaches, and legal professionals who wanted to help clients develop strategic responses to harassment and manipulation. But the moment that truly validated everything I'd built came 3 years after Brittany Chun had first tried to destroy my life. I was keynoting a conference on workplace harassment when a young woman approached me during the break. "Miss Patterson, I need to tell you something. My name is Amanda, and I work in digital marketing in Seattle. Last year, I discovered that my boyfriend was cheating on me with multiple women. When I confronted him, he and one of his affair partners launched a coordinated attack against me on social media. They created fake accounts, posted intimate photos without my consent, and tried to get me fired from my job by sending fabricated stories about my conduct to my employer. My stomach tightened as I recognized the familiar pattern. What did you do? I remembered reading about your case in the business journals. I researched your company and your methods. I couldn't afford to hire you, but I used your book and your public speaking materials to develop my own response strategy. I documented everything, built a comprehensive evidence file, and systematically exposed their harassment campaign to their employers, their families, and their social networks. What happened? My ex-boyfriend was arrested for revenge porn and cyberstalking. His affair partner lost her job and is facing civil lawsuits from multiple women she'd harassed. And I got promoted at my company after my boss saw how professionally I'd handled a crisis situation. She paused, looking directly into my eyes. But more importantly, I learned that I don't have to be a victim. I learned that smart, strategic action is more powerful than emotional reactions. I learned that bullies rely on their targets being unprepared and isolated, and that when you fight back with superior resources and better strategy, they usually crumble quickly. Amanda, you just described the most important lesson anyone can learn. That you have more power than you think, and that refusing to be victimized is not the same thing as seeking revenge. Exactly. And I wanted to thank you for showing women like me that we don't have to accept harassment and betrayal as the price of being female. We can fight back, we can win, and we can do it ethically. That evening, as I sat in my hotel room preparing for the next day's presentation, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The scared, confused woman who'd received threatening photos from her husband's mistress had evolved into someone who helped other people reclaim their power and dignity. The personal crisis that could have destroyed me had instead become the foundation for a career dedicated to ensuring that bullies faced consequences for their actions. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Sarah, calling from our office in New York. Margaret, I have news. That Fortune 500 case we've been working on, the CEO whose ex-wife was running a defamation campaign against him through fake news websites. We just got confirmation that the perpetrators have been charged with multiple felonies, and the client's reputation has been fully restored. That's excellent news. How many active cases are we handling now? 43 individual clients and 12 corporate accounts. We've had to hire 6 additional staff members just to keep up with demand. Margaret, you've built something extraordinary here. We've built something extraordinary, Sarah. None of this would have been possible without your support during those first dark weeks when I was learning to fight back. Do you ever regret how this all started? Do you ever wish you'd handled things differently with David and Brittany? I considered the question carefully. Sarah, if I could go back and prevent the affair, prevent the harassment, prevent the whole situation from happening, of course I would. But I can't regret how I responded once it started. Learning to defend myself strategically and professionally didn't just save my marriage. It saved my life. It turned me into someone I actually respect. Someone who refuses to be victimized. Someone who helps other people discover their own strength. And Brittany? Do you ever wonder what happened to her? Occasionally. Last I heard, she'd moved to a small town in Oregon and was working as a real estate agent under her maiden name. I hope she's learned something from the experience. I hope she's become someone who builds relationships instead of destroying them. But ultimately, her choices and her consequences are her own responsibility. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began working on my presentation for the next day. The conference theme was Turning Crisis into Opportunity, and my speech would focus on how strategic response to personal attacks could become a catalyst for professional and personal growth. The irony wasn't lost on me that Brittany Chen's attempt to humiliate and destroy me had ultimately led to the most successful and fulfilling period of my life. Her cruelty had forced me to discover capabilities I didn't know I possessed. Her attacks had motivated me to build defenses that became weapons. Her assumption that I was weak and helpless had proven to be the biggest miscalculation of her life. But more importantly, her behavior had taught me that there were consequences for trying to destroy other people's lives, and that sometimes the best way to protect yourself was to ensure that bullies faced those consequences swiftly and completely. The next morning, I stood before an audience of 300 business executives, lawyers, and HR professionals, sharing the lessons I'd learned from my transformation from victim to victor. The key insight from my experience, I told them, is that strategic response to crisis doesn't just solve immediate problems. It builds capabilities that serve you for the rest of your life. When someone tried to destroy my marriage and my dignity through social media harassment, I could have collapsed into victimhood. Instead, I chose to fight back using professional-level skills and resources. That choice didn't just save my reputation. It revealed who I really was beneath years of accommodation and self-sacrifice. I clicked to a slide showing before and after photos, the tired, accommodating woman I'd been 5 years ago, and the confident, successful person I'd become. Today, I run a nationally recognized agency that helps people defend themselves against harassment and reputation attacks. I've written a best-selling book about strategic response to social media bullying. I travel the country teaching people that they have more power than they realize and more options than they've been told. None of that would have existed if I'd chosen to be a victim instead of a victor. The applause was sustained and enthusiastic, but what moved me most were the individual conversations afterward. Person after person approached me with their own stories of harassment, betrayal, and attacks on their reputation. Each conversation reinforced what I'd learned. There were far more people being victimized than there were people equipped to fight back effectively. But they were learning. And with each person who discovered their own power to respond strategically to bullies, the world became a little bit safer for everyone who refused to accept cruelty as inevitable. 6 months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note and a small photograph. The note read, "Margaret, you don't know me, but I attended your workshop in Denver last year. I was being stalked and harassed by my ex-husband, who was using our children as weapons to control me. Your presentation taught me how to document everything, build a legal case, and respond strategically instead of emotionally. Yesterday, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison for stalking and violation of protective orders. My children and I are safe now, and it's because you taught me that I didn't have to be a victim. Thank you for showing me how to fight back effectively. Sarah M." The photograph showed a woman and 2 young children at what appeared to be a graduation ceremony. All 3 were smiling, and the woman was wearing a cap and gown. I kept that note and photograph on my desk as a reminder of why this work mattered. Every person who learned to defend themselves strategically was someone who couldn't be victimized by bullies. Every successful response to harassment made the world a little bit safer for everyone who valued dignity over false peace. As I write this, it's been 7 years since Brittany Chan sent me those first threatening photos. 7 years since I learned that I had a choice between being a victim and being a victor. 7 years since I discovered that strategic, professional response to personal attacks could become the foundation for a life of purpose and impact. The scared, accommodating woman who opened those messages and saw her husband's betrayal displayed on her phone screen is gone. In her place is someone who refuses to be intimidated, someone who helps others discover their own strength, someone who believes that bullies should face consequences for their actions. If I could go back and speak to that woman sitting in her kitchen 7 years ago, staring at explicit photos and threatening messages, I would tell her this: you're about to discover that you're much stronger than you think. You're about to learn that you have more options than anyone has told you. You're about to find out that the person trying to destroy you has made the biggest mistake of her life by choosing the wrong target. And most importantly, you're about to begin the most successful and fulfilling chapter of your life. The woman who tried to humiliate me thought she was sending threatening photos to a helpless victim. Instead, she was declaring war on someone with the skills, resources, and determination to win. She wanted to make me cry, but she made me rich instead. She wanted to destroy my reputation, but she launched my career. She wanted to prove I was weak, but she forced me to discover I was strong. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything your enemy thought you could never be. And sometimes the person who tries to destroy you ends up being the catalyst for your greatest transformation. Brittany Chan wanted to make me go viral as a victim. Instead, I made her go viral as a cautionary tale. And 7 years later, I'm still grateful for the lesson she taught me. That when bullies attack, the best response isn't surrender. It's strategic, professional, overwhelming victory. The choice is always yours. You can be a victim or you can be a victor. But you can't be both.